Hello, everybody. Welcome to Diabetes Boot Camp. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. I've got my camera off right now as we're recording this particular session. So, I wanted to thank you for attending what is a brand new program here for UF Health. So, we are based here in Jacksonville in employee wellness. My name is John Bredenberg, and I'll be leading you through this overall program, but I know we have participants both in Jacksonville as well as Gainesville. A little bit about me: I manage the employee wellness program here in Jacksonville, but I'm also a certified diabetes educator and registered dietitian. And over the years, we've offered a wide range of diabetes programs here in Jacksonville, as well as our surrounding campuses in Gainesville. And what I wanted to do was kind of get back to the drawing board and develop a program that really focuses on some of the problem solving and coping systems that are needed to really succeed and living a life well with diabetes. So that's the idea about this brand new program. And we'll focus more on some of those aspects with some of the traditional lessons about medication and nutrition and physical activity and some of the traditional standard diabetes education programs. But really, this whole curriculum is built around the new 7 self-care behaviors for diabetes self-management. And at the heart of those behaviors is coping. And that's what we're going to be starting with today: how to cope healthfully with a diagnosis with diabetes, and what to do if you're noticing some things that might require some assistance. So that's the idea. It's got the boot camp name because we're taking this serious, and you're going to be given homework assignments each week, but by no means are we going to put you through a traditional military boot camp unless you really want to. You want to get down on the ground and give me 100 push-ups, that's fine by me. But again, the idea behind the new name is to really talk about getting attention right to setting some smart goals, taking diabetes seriously, but also understanding that it's much more than just eating well, moving well, and taking our medication. We need to pay attention to our mental health too, and understand healthy ways to cope with the disease and how to problem solve and live a successful life with diabetes. So every session that we have will be recorded. Of course, this is all being done through Zoom, but please do not let that stop you from asking questions along the way. You can type them in the chat. You can unmute your microphone if that's easier for you. Whatever works best for you. You want to try to make this as robust of a learning experience as possible. You've got the schedule right there on the screen. You also saw it when you first signed up. After today's class and each successive class, you'll get an email with the PowerPoint slides and any particular attachments that may be relevant to whatever's discussed. You'll notice when I sent out just a generic Zoom invite, there was also supposed to be an introductory email that accompanied it, but I don't think that made it out to everyone where it needs to be. So I do apologize if you just got the generic Zoom invite, but I did want to let you know that the week of July 4th, we will not have class. It will still show up on your calendar because we made this a recurring invite, but there will be a 2-week break after our healthy eating class next week before our class after that, which will be July 13th. So just make a note of that. I don't want you to think we're standing you up that week, but it was just easier to set up the recurring invite and include that week as well. So without further ado, as I said before, we are going to start with perhaps what is the most centrally important self-care behavior with diabetes self-management, and that is healthy coping. How do we deal with the diagnosis of diabetes? If we're not able to cope with that diagnosis, learning about medication, learning about activity, learning about healthy eating, it's really going to be irrelevant. So healthy coping is at the centerpiece of the self-care behavior model, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. And as I said before, we're going to do less of the review stuff that you may have heard when you were first diagnosed or other classes. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, I will talk briefly about diabetes and just making sure everyone understands some of the fundamentals of diabetes. But as I said before, we're going to spend more time on the coping side of it. Just as a quick review, we all know diabetes is a chronic condition, meaning that it's always going to be there. Our medication regimens may change, but the diagnosis of diabetes is for life. So it's a chronic, long-lasting condition that basically is impacting how your body is going to turn food into energy. So with diabetes, whether it's type 1, insulin requiring, or type 2, which is typically adult onset or non-insulin dependent, there's some disruption in how that insulin is being produced, or maybe it's not being produced at all. And when that insulin is not available or is not used effectively, all of the food that we're eating that is converting into glucose so we can turn it into energy starts to accumulate in the bloodstream. So that's why those early symptoms, when maybe we were first diagnosed, when your blood glucose levels were extremely elevated, that was just all the food that you're eating not able to get into the cells, and it was spilling into the urine. So you may have been going to the bathroom quite a bit. You may have had a pretty intense thirst, and you maybe didn't have much energy because, again, the glucose wasn't getting into the cells for energy. Over time, as this starts to, be more of an issue where the blood sugars remain elevated, that starts to break down all of the small blood vessels in our body. And that's what leads to some of those nasty complications. So you may not feel particularly uncomfortable if your blood sugar is elevated in the 200s or the 300s or the 400s, but over time, we see deterioration of our blood vessels, and that's what's leading to kidney failure, heart disease, blindness, nerve damage, and that's what we're trying to avoid by making sure we try to keep our blood glucose levels within an optimal range. Not good, not bad. We don't want to attach values to them, but understand that there's an optimal range for blood glucose, and that's usually where we feel our best. So as a quick review, most of the individuals in this program have type 2 diabetes. So this is typically something that is happening as we get a little bit older. We develop some insulin resistance. There's a lot of other factors that might play a role here. But with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas is still producing a little bit of insulin, but our body is resistant to how effective it can be. And then in some cases, it might be overproducing insulin, and the insulin's still not able to regulate blood sugar. So you see the stomach is converting food into glucose. The most important nutrient in all of this, and the one that gets a lot of attention, and you'll learn a little bit more detail next week, is of course carbohydrate. But we also see other types of nutrients do convert small amounts of energy to glucose, like protein and to a smaller extent fat. But essentially, your body's breaking down carbs, turning it into glucose, that glucose entering the bloodstream. Without insulin to let it into the cells, it just starts to increase. And that's where we start to see those unfortunate complications. And what we have to cope with is this fact. Having diabetes is like having a full-time job you can never quit. All right. You have to learn how to deal with it. And it presents a lot of struggles. And when we look at surveys, and each of you that took the registration survey, hopefully before starting this program, were asked, hey, what are some of the things that you are struggling with when you manage your own health? And you can understand when you look at some of the responses that a lot of us are in the same boat. I put them up here on the screen to summarize some of the surveys that we got back. A lot of you are struggling with trying to maintain or lose weight, maybe struggling with physical activity or how to choose healthier foods or getting enough sleep. And there's a lot weighing on us right now, and it can be overwhelming at times. And I think that's why this particular session, this first class that we're going into in Diabetes Boot Camp, is so important, so you can understand what you're going through is normal. It's a normal experience to feel, and there are resources to help you move through this and move through this together, taking advantage of some of the resources here within this program, which is also why, as part of this particular program, Diabetes Boot Camp, we're also inviting each of you to book an appointment to talk with one of us, myself as a diabetes educator, or our new registered dietitian, Krupa Patel, to meet with us one-on-one so we can talk individually what might be the most pressing matter for you in your own quest to help control diabetes. Because as I said before, this is a full-time job. There's a lot to remember as far as nutrition and medication and activity, but we want you to understand fully what support systems are in place to help you, not just within our organization, but also outside of our organization too. Because sometimes you just really just need a friend to talk to, or maybe you want to engage in some of the social media resources that are out there for persons with diabetes. So again, we're here to help. Today, we're going to learn about all those resources for help and ways to assess where you are in terms of your own personal desire to help successfully live a healthy life with diabetes. Before we do that, I want to listen to a story. So we're going to meet Yvonne. So Yvonne's got about a 4-minute anecdote that she's going to share with you that talks about her own experiences with having diabetes. This is right from a CDC toolkit on what they call new beginnings, and that is living a healthy life with diabetes. So I'm going to click on the audio piece here, but I want you to pay close attention to Yvonne's initial reactions when she was first diagnosed, and how her denial of that diagnosis affected her health. And then also, more generally, what are some other emotions that persons with diabetes may experience? So let's listen in.
My name is Yvonne Young, and I am a registered nurse. I am a diabetes
Sorry about that.
educator, and I have diabetes. I've had diabetes for over 25 years. And the way I discovered that I had diabetes, I was applying for some life insurance. And one of the things they did was a glucose tolerance test. And at the time, I was told that I was borderline diabetic. And the term borderline to me meant that I still had time to play. I really wasn't diabetic, but eventually I would become a diabetic. But just at the mention of the term diabetes, I went straight into denial, and I ignored my disease for a very long time. I weighed over 200 pounds. I smoked 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I didn't do any kind of exercise, and I ate whatever I wanted and how much I wanted. And I was wearing a size 20 dress. And I was feeling bad and had all the symptoms of diabetes, but in my mind, I rationalized that, well, it was something else. My vision blurred because I need glasses. I'm thirsty all the time because I'm tired. I go to the bathroom because I drink a lot of water. And just totally ignored the disease. And even after I got my official diagnosis that I was diabetic and need to be on medication, I was a poor complier. I didn't take any medication. I didn't check my blood sugars as I should. I didn't exercise or anything because in my mind I didn't have diabetes, because when you're in denial, that was a comfort zone to me. I didn't have to address the issues of diabetes. But what I found out, that it was also a deadly zone, because as a result of me ignoring my disease, I allowed complications to start. Both of my parents later became diagnosed with adult onset type diabetes, my father first and then my mother, and then my oldest sister. And theirs was lack of knowledge. My oldest sister, like me, in denial and just didn't want to hear about diabetes, didn't want to learn about diabetes, and didn't want to make the lifestyle changes. She too was overweight, and she was a smoker and didn't exercise either. So people would tell me all the time, well, you're a nurse, you're supposed to know better. Yeah, but knowing better and doing better are two different things because I still face the human challenges. So one day, her little voice said to me, Yvonne, do you realize what you're doing to yourself? And I decided then that my lifestyle was killing me. Not exercising, not taking medication, not checking my blood sugars, not trying to follow any type of meal plan. And I had to acknowledge that the numbness in my feet was a result of nerve damage from my uncontrolled diabetes, the coronary artery disease, the patches on my arteries. So I made the lifestyle changes. I decided, yes, I want to live. I like life. So I quit smoking cold turkey. Didn't have the withdrawals or anything because I was determined that I liked living more than I liked cigarettes. And I came to the conclusion that food was not worth dying for. So I looked at how I was eating and made healthier choices. And I started walking. And in the beginning, initially when I started, I lost a total of 50 pounds. I came from a size 20 to a cute little size 12. So in life, you have to find something good in everything bad. So yes, it was bad that I developed diabetes, but it made me start taking care of myself, and it got me a cute little size 12 at the deal too.
So again, if we look for how Yvonne initially reacted, she of course was in denial, and unfortunately, this denial led to some early complications for her. But her story is probably one we can all relate to. If we look at some of the other emotions persons with diabetes may experience, there might be similar ones that you were feeling or different. It could be dealing with shock, it could be sadness, it could be anxiety, could be guilt, it could be grief, but um, there could be some positive emotions too. And when what happened with Yvonne is something that I think is an important revelation. And basically, Yvonne found her why. She eventually realized that if she didn't start to take better care of herself, um, she wasn't going to be around for too much longer. And I think that's important to understand. And another concept that she talked about, and maybe some of us can resonate with this, all working in healthcare to some extent, or within the academic setting, and that is knowing better and doing better are two very different things. So we have to find our why. When we look at some of those struggles of what we're going through, whether it's physical activity or whether it's weight loss, we got to find the why, and that reason will help maintain that motivation. And one of your homework assignments, I'm going to give you an exercise, um, not a physical exercise, but a mental exercise to help you get to the root of what your why might be. Because I think it's important when we
My
look at,
name is Yvonne
whoops,
Young.
sorry about that. We've got Yvonne back here. I think that when we look at diabetes, it's normal to experience a wide range of emotions, and taking frequent pauses throughout the day to check in with yourself to see how you're feeling is a very important and underrated step in effective self-care. And ask for help. Ask for help um, is going to be very vital and very important too. And one of your other homework assignments is going to be taking a short questionnaire that'll take a look at what are some possible sources of diabetes distress for you, and give you some insight as to when it might be a good time to check in with someone to talk about some of these issues. But it's all part of that healthy coping um, mission, and it's as I said, it's the ultimate first step towards reaching our health goals. Because diabetes, as I said, it's a stressor, and stress can have a tremendous impact on our body. We've all been living in stress for pretty much at least 2+ years now, and some of us may maybe even more than that. And when we look at how stress can impact the body, I think it's important to kind of visit some of the fundamental components about stress. First, it can be positive too. A little bit of stress helps us produce. So you see that diagram there when we look at eustress and distress. So eustress will be more of the positive type of stress that helps keep us motivated to produce something. Distress is where it gets to a point where it's detrimental to our health and well-being. And sometimes the stress can be perceived. A lot of times how you respond to a situation can be even far greater than the situation itself. We all may know somebody that might appear to be overreacting to something pretty simple, whether it's a flat tire or adjustment to the thermostat or whatever it might be. Our reaction to that situation is what we can ultimately control, and that's the effect of successful stress management, learning what's going to be a healthy response to a situation and trying to focus on what you can control. The issue with diabetes that in addition to being a emotional stressor, it is also a physical stressor. And what I mean by that, it does have some biochemical impacts on our body. Perhaps when you were first diagnosed with diabetes and your physician and healthcare team talked about how your diet is going to have a great impact on your blood sugar. And that's true, but stress can have an even greater impact, because when we're under mild stress or chronic stress or even acute stress, our hormone levels are impacted, our cortisol levels, which is one of those stress hormones, increases. And not only does it increase our appetite and increase our blood glucose levels, but it also causes us to store body fat and decreases our overall metabolic rate, how many calories we might burn. The secondary impact of this stress as it relates to diabetes is that we see a further reduction in insulin sensitivity. So remember, with type 2 diabetes, we're dealing with some insulin being produced, we're just not very sensitive to it. So that insulin sensitivity is even further reduced when we're under stress. And then we also, as I said, we see a bump in our blood glucose levels because our liver is kicking out some glucose, because basically it's a very modified fight or flight response. And that's what we're dealing with diabetes. However, the emotional side is important too, because we know that all persons with diabetes, whether we're dealing with type 1 to type 2 or gestational diabetes, we're all at higher risk for mental health issues. And sometimes these are just mistaken for behavioral problems in those with diabetes. So it's almost a kind of a catch-22 scenario when we talk about depression and diabetes. And am I depressed because I have diabetes, or did diabetes cause my depression? So we want to try to screen for these on a regular basis and try to destigmatize the idea that it's not something, it's a sign of strength to ask for help. So I alluded to something that I think is important to just point out as your instructor. I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was a teenager. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, so I had to take insulin right from the get-go. And I was just a kid, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. I didn't run in my family. No one had ever even heard of it in my family before. I thought I had mono when I was starting to, lose all this weight and go to the restroom all the time. And I was just filled with anxiety and fear and wondering, how am I going to get through this? And it wasn't until I went to my first diabetes camp and I saw other individuals with diabetes, just like me, living a happy life, doing all the things that I wanted to do: play basketball, play baseball, play soccer, hang out with friends, and all of those things could still be done. And it wasn't until I started to talk to people about that and understand how they dealt with something and how they were experiencing it, where I really started to embrace it myself. Now, part of it was just own natural maturity as you're growing up as a teenager. Of course, as a 16-year-old, I thought I knew everything, right? Just like those of us with kids might be dealing with teenagers right now. They already know everything. So, but this is a very important revelation for me. And then fast forward 30 years later, and my control for diabetes started to kind of fall off a little bit. And again, a good case of knowing better and doing better are totally different. Wasn't quite as attentive to details as I would like to have been with diabetes. And after I learned I was going to be a dad and realizing that if I want to be there for my daughter, I needed to get back in line with proper self care. Now, again, I was doing fairly well, but there's always room for improvement with diabetes. And having my daughter was really the why for me, making sure that, okay, let's make sure I'm the most up to date on the therapy that I need to be. And the reason I share this with you is because, again, we're all dealing with something. We're all focused on something and we're all trying to manage the best we can. And there have been a lot of things thrown at us over the past couple of years. And unfortunately, diabetes has always been there on top of COVID, on top of everything else. And this is why when you now have the opportunity to get in front of your healthcare team to talk about what's causing you the most concern for for yourself, and what do you find it hard to do, and how you take care of yourself, whether it's eating healthier or moving more, getting enough sleep, taking the time to pause and be mindful. The more you do this, the more it helps your overall resilience to deal with some of those day-to-day struggles. So it's, again, it's kind of has a snowball effect. So the more we take care of ourselves, the more resilient we can become. And then when we do have those little bumps in the road with diabetes self-care, it gives us the energy we need to get through that. But again, it all starts by talking with our healthcare team and discuss some of those issues and describe those feelings and concerns. And when we look at some of the resources that are out there, a lot of them we want to do under the guidance of our physician, but there is one survey tool that I've found particularly helpful to kind of open your eyes as what might be helping you or causing you to expend some energy on diabetes. And that's called the diabetes stress scale. So after today's session, you're going to see a link, and it's right there on the PowerPoint too, where you take this diabetes distress scale. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. It's just 17 questions long. What you're going to do is you're going to read a statement, and you're going to simply select whether that statement is a problem, a slight problem, moderate problem, or moving right along to a very serious problem. And at the end of that scale, it's going to give you a score and show you which of those 4 types of distress that it's measuring is impacting you the most, whether it's the emotional burden of diabetes, whether it's physician related, or maybe it's regimen related, or maybe it's interpersonal distress. So it's going to help give you some insight as to where you might be right now. And again, it's a confidential, real quick survey. You don't have to create a username or password. You just pops right up. You select it and you'll go through the prompts. And I think it's a pretty robust tool to kind of at least let you take stock where you are. And it might be something that you want to do on a routine basis. So take it today and then maybe take it in a month or so as we go through several more sessions. So we all get to the point where, okay, yes, John, we all know diabetes is a lot of work. It could be a struggle. It's another emotional drain on me. I worry about getting complications and being there for my family. That's part of it. But when should you seek help? So there's no real one size fits all answer to this, but some of the telltale signs of some clinical issues where you might need to talk to a psychiatrist and see what some options might be is if you don't really have any interest or pleasure in any of the activities you used to, if you're having difficulty with sleeping too much or can't sleep at all, you don't really see the value in checking your blood sugar or taking your medications, you can't concentrate on anything, and feel that diabetes has pretty much defeated you and you just can't take care of yourself. So each of us on this call have access to employee assistance program, whether you're in Gainesville, whether you're in Jacksonville. So that's a resource that's readily available to you. You can also talk with your primary care provider or look at some of the other local resources in your community that might be there for mental health counseling. We have a pretty good resource here in Jacksonville called our CHAMP Center. but also there's some similar other entities outside of that that could be something that could, help you discuss some of these issues. And, we look at popular coping strategies, some of them are pretty straightforward. We've heard them a lot. We heard this a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, even people without diabetes. Oh, let's get out there and be active and get involved in, hobbies and support groups and Zoom sessions. But, really it's trying to look at where you are right now in your emotionally supportive relationships and try to maintain those. Okay. We look at other popular coping strategies, taking responsibility for that situation, dealing with diabetes head on. Um, if it's some other type of stress, whether it's a type of medication you're taking or a type of blood glucose meter that you're using, and that's causing you stress, look at something if that's something you can change, or if it's something you can't change, whether it's an unhealthy relationship or some other type of area that's causing you stress that you do not need. Try to distance yourself from that stress. And then again, some of the other adaptive measures for coping, again, all about maintaining our resilience by being active, getting involved in hobbies, watching a funny movie, taking a stroll. These are some things to channel some of that and kind of keep us moving forward. But I think the relationship piece is helpful, but it's also a double-edged sword. And I want to talk about that for just a moment here and ask you a question that you can answer to yourself. And that's if you've ever had a friend or family tell you this at a dinner party or a party in general. Say, hey, you don't need to eat that again or another piece of that, John. It's just going to raise your blood sugar, right? You have people telling you what you can and can't eat. And as a person with diabetes, that can be pretty aggravating, right? I mean, sometimes this can be more harmful than good. Sometimes this nagging is actually counterproductive. So we know our family means well, perhaps when they're giving us guidance and they love us, but that in and of itself, those type of you statements really put people on the defensive. And as I said, it just as well as I do, they can be really unhelpful. But it's important to remember that your support systems, they can't read your mind. Let these supports know what you need and don't need. And if you are dealing with those types of scenarios where people are trying to tell you what you can and can't do with your diabetes, just tell them how you feel and use that I feel lead in versus you. So, you know what? I feel bothered when you tell me what I shouldn't be eating versus you're annoying me with that, so that you puts people on the defensive. So try to rephrase it and talk about using an I feel approach versus a you approach. And we want to acknowledge their concerns. Say, hey, I appreciate you showing concern for what I'm eating, but I'm on a path that I feel that's sustainable for me, and it would be helpful if you would share that with me. If I know I might be asking a lot, but if we both work on behaviors towards each other, maybe we can both win out with a better relationship. Maybe there's something that I'm doing that might be impacting you. So try to maintain an open dialogue and tell them what you might need. Maybe you just need, hey, you know what? Let's check in with each other every couple of weeks and see how it's going. But again, use that I feel and try to avoid the you, because when you get into that argumentative mode, it ends up being adding to your stress. So remember, we're already dealing with a lot already. So we want to try to minimize that whenever possible. There are a wealth of resources out there when we talk about having pathways to see how people are getting engaged with support system, dealing with friends and family members, or educational support or community support. I've got a pretty good attachment from the diabetes online community. This is just a snippet of it, so don't try to worry about jotting down all these websites, but it's got a lot of different organizations listed, some support group listed, some helpful blogs that people have found that kind of helps it look at through another lens. So this is a resource that I'm attached to the closeout email for today that has all the other lesson materials there. It's a nice little compact PDF that I think you'll find particularly helpful. So as we wrap up, one of the things that we're going to be doing as we move forward is trying to set a goal. What are you trying to get out of this? We already know what your struggles might be when dealing with diabetes, but what are your overall goals for self-management? And as you set this goal, whether it deals with weight loss or whether it deals with nutrition or medication or mental health or physical activity, want to make it as specific as possible. What exactly are you going to do with weight or nutrition or activity or mental health? What is it that can be measured? And you want to try to make sure that it's something that's attainable. You don't want to go into this, say, you know what, I want to lose 100 pounds in 3 months. That's probably not going to be attainable at all. Why this is important, and many of you that have attended wellness sessions before, we've talked about SMART goals till we're blue in the face. But the secondary purpose behind this and why I want you to do this is that this goal setting helps create a sense of purpose. That sense of purpose helps increase that solution-based thinking and helps us ultimately find that why. So when we look at our goals for self-care or leading a healthy lifestyle, create a list of pros and cons. Look at the pros for doing what you want to do and the cons for what's holding you back. Cross out anything on that list that really is just an excuse, whether it's lack of time, lack of knowledge. Eliminate any con that's a limitation, whether it's learning a skill. And then also eliminate any of the extrinsic reasons to live well that aren't going to motivate you in the long term. If you're simply trying to put weight loss as a goal for diabetes care, but really you're just trying to lose weight for a wedding, that's not going to keep you motivated in the long term. And magically, the remaining reasons are your why. As I said before, my why for trying to get back on track with diabetes self-care is to be there for my daughter and watch her grow older. And that is the reason, that extrinsic reason that's keeping me motivated. So again, 3 homework assignments for this week. These aren't collected. Again, this is a different kind of boot camp. I'm not going to be coming to your house, knocking on your door, collecting these homework assignments. We might have you talk about it for a little bit, and what I want you to do this week before you chat with Krupa and talk about nutrition is take that diabetes distress scale. Try to drill down and find your why for living well with diabetes, and then create at least one SMART goal for yourself for the duration of this program. So I know I've covered a lot of ground when we talk about mental health and healthy coping strategies, but I do have a few moments to answer questions. So if any questions come up, please type them in the chat and I'll be happy to help answer them for you. Yes, a question here that's come in. Will we get the slides and the links? Yes. So if you have registered for this program, so meaning you went online to that Qualtrics survey and you did all the questions that we had, I've got your email. We will send this out to everyone that's registered. If you got the Zoom link directly from me, I've already got your email. If you got it from a second person that said, hey, you know what, you should try to tune into this talk, you want to try to send me an email or send me an email after today's class, and that way we can make sure we get you in that registration group. But if you got the Zoom link from me, I've already got your email and you're good to go. We'll get that out to you very soon, probably tomorrow morning.